R&M, this is Christy.
Hi, Christy. This is Andy Bacon calling with the City of Seward and the Flood Service Area Board and the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. Would you like to...
This is the work session on beach revitalization between the Bear Creek Flood Service Area Board and the Seward Planning and Zoning. It's a public meeting, so we hope some public come on down. And here's another one of our commissioners. So Andy's going to give a brief outline of what we're going to do, and then we're going to all introduce ourselves, just our name and what board we represent, and then we've got Christy for a presentation, I think.
All right, thank you. Can you hear us okay, Christy?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so thank you. So at our last meeting where we joined together to discuss this topic in September of last year, we discussed Army Corps permitting relating to a beach revitalization project along the waterfront. So we learned about Army Corps of Engineers regulatory authority under the Section 404 of the Clean Water Act pertaining to deposit of fill materials below the mean high water line. The consensus of the group at the meeting was that we wanted to look into doing a project where we would deposit fill both above and below the mean high water line, thereby necessitating the application for an Army Corps permit. So we have on the phone with us Christy McLean. She is an environmental services manager from R&M Consultants and is an expert in these very types of permitting processes that we are going to be discussing. So she will be with us for this meeting in order to answer questions and help us narrow down our focus. So what I think would be beneficial for us to get started is to sort of like define a project objective, because when you know the why, the what makes a greater impact. So once we get going with our discussion, we can hear from Christy about what the requirements would be for an Army Corps application. And then before we get going with that, while you're all thinking of project objectives, let's go around the room quickly and introduce ourselves. I'll start. I'm Andy Bacon, Planning Assistant with the City of Seward.
I'm Cindy Eklund, Chair with the Seward Planning and Zoning Commission.
Mark Danzer, Chair, Seward Bear Creek Flood Service Area.
Gary Stace, Planning and Zoning.
I'm Randy Stauffer with the Flood Board.
Craig Edwards,
Bob Reisner, Flood Board.
Orson Smith, Flood Board.
Ed DeCastro, Flood Board.
Dwayne Atwood, Flood Board.
Tom Swan, Planning and Zoning.
Liz DeMoss, Planning and Zoning.
Daniel Charbonneau, Planning and Zoning.
Stephanie Presley, Flood Service Area Program Lead.
Tony Bachla, City of Seward City Council.
Tyler Florence, Director of Parks and Recreation.
And Jackie Wild will be in and out of the meeting.
All right.
So, she is the Community Development Director.
All right. So I've provided for you guys some aerial photographs of a portion of the waterfront from Jefferson to approximately Monroe Street. Around the table, there's not enough for everybody, but you can share with your neighbor.
There's chairs for you to come up to the table.
As well as a hydrographic survey,
Sorry.
larger images from Monroe Street all the way down to Adams, and where the coastline turns the corner there. And so something to help with your discussion of what you might want to see.
So last year, I thought that we had picked some areas of this, or did we discuss the whole long, Stephanie?
We took away that you guys were interested in beach nourishment from basically the Sea Life Center all the way down to Shuckler Creek.
Oh, right.
And so my takeaway was that obviously this project would need to be developed in phases. And so we were hoping to start off with like an easier access section and work our way north, or south, thank you. Mainly because I think a lot of the storm surge that we're gonna experience is gonna be coming from the northern side during our winter storms, sorry, southern side during our winter storms. And there's already a lot of riprap and infrastructure from the Sea Life Center, at least to in front of the Branson Pavilion. I think we've got some riprap stabilization, coastal erosion stabilization about that far. So it seems like an easier way to start would be the northern end closest to Scheffler Creek, and actually look at, what do we want this to look like? How does this impact any improvements we want to see to campgrounds or waterfront infrastructure? How would we, stage this project to get it done? What kind of, finished features would we want to see in one project area? And with the idea of we'd be able to develop a plan or maybe talk to a coastal engineer to actually look at, if this is what we want our final product to be, what are the steps we need to take to get there? And so we want to hear from you, maybe thinking about this area closer to Scheffler Creek, and what does that look like? And then I was hoping we'd hear from Tyler, kind of your thoughts on the campgrounds and the waterfront walkway.
Okay, so you mentioned the winter storms, which we're still kind of in winter, but we wouldn't get started on this for a year or 9 months. What is your projection on that?
Yeah, so it would be dependent if we feel the need to go with the coastal engineer. And, I've been looking into some of these different programs around the nation, and there's lots of different communities who've done beach nourishment. And basically knowing what we want it to look like as a final product will let us know how much detail we need to put into it. So if all we're doing is dumping sand on top of our rocks, we might have some concerns about the sea life on the rocks there, but that's simpler than let's do, as much feet out of beach that we can actually make and create some shoreline protection with this deposition of material. So like in Virginia Beach, they have sections of their beach line where they've actually put 300 feet out, and it's, that's their coastal storm surge protection zone, and it's saved them probably millions of dollars during hurricane season. So I think starting out with that, what is our objective here with this project, and how can we break it down into phases to reach those objectives?
Okay, who here knows the geography of the near water? Because it's not shallow, so that would be huge.
Did you find the symmetry map?
This one right here, okay. So there's some areas where it looks like there's some idle flats. As you get closer to Scheffler Creek, I think there are. So Tyler, new to the job, but you probably came with some ideas. So what is, as this is mainly the area managed by Parks and Rec for our summer campers, what do you have in mind on that?
So, I think it's a good idea. I think I definitely support the direction that they want to take it in. Yeah, it does strike me as I've thought about this area, we've sort of thought about the different use cases for that area and how that serves as sort of critical infrastructure for the city. Yeah, it just struck me, because I didn't grow up in a cool stuff area, but then the entire community lives on this, I said, but any moment a tsunami could strike, or just storm surges, stuff like that. So, how can we harden this area? How can we make it more resilient to help protect the city while also preserving recreational opportunities for the waterfront? So specifically for the campgrounds, I have a map up in my office that sort of references, what a future sketch out of the campground, the waterfront park area would have looked like. Some sketched in that 84, 85, something like that. And most of the easternmost edge of the waterfront along where the waterfront trail is now. It's mostly green open space. And I mean, I have thoughts, but then again, I'm only one person, and this big projects like this, major decisions like that drastically affect infrastructure for the whole community, that would require more community input. My personal take is that I think this area would be well served by restoring much of this area to green and open space. I think there's still plenty of capacity in our upper lot area for RV and for tent camping, and other areas in the city as well, such as Forest Acres and Spring Creek. And I think that would serve a couple purposes. One is just a whole lot of open space or green spaces in the city proper, especially in the downtown area. I think we could definitely restore and make a much more pastoral recreational area. It would offset some of the density and overcrowding issues that, to my understanding, happen here at peak summertime use. And some of the input I've heard from different community members is that residents would like to be able to use parts of the park. Actually, they will enjoy parts of the city, during the summertime. Where what I've heard is people they won't even go down there, during the height of tourist season, because people they're parked right here on the trail. Who wants to use a trail when Bob and Jan are on the RV right next to you? They're literally sitting out on the trail, or they're setting up picnic tables on the trail, stuff like that. So pushing that back, creating sort of a buffer zone there, more of a green buffer zone to our upper lot, and just sort of making a different transition gradients from the shoreline itself. And this project would fit perfectly in with that. So, sorry, I kind of go on.
Well, so let me kind of piece this together. Not really using the area between the bike path and the mean high water for anything other than protecting what's currently there.
Right.
You don't have a vision for adding anything more than opportunities for green space and resident entertainment or pleasure. And then you might even move, if that were possible, you might move your current frontline parking back farther away from the trail.
Potentially. Yes.
Potentially,
Yes.
after you see what it's like for summer.
I think what I'd like to do is I'd have to gather some more community input. I'd like to sketch out a more formal vision of what that could look like. Potentially do sort of a test area where there's specific areas along the waterfront where I think it'd be more feasible to do that in one or two places, and that way kind of give a proof of concept to people before we just go whole hog along the whole trail corridor. Yes.
So that's kind of off the topic of beach revitalization. But I pretty much, you weren't planning on using anything that we would do water side of the bike trail for new facilities, or at your envision now until you have your public meetings.
Right. I'm open to suggestions. If someone has a great idea for me.
Stephanie?
I'm just curious how people would feel about pulling those camp pits off of that side of the water
Fire
path.
pits.
The fire pits, thank you, and moving them, either making them go away or moving them onto the other side of the bike path. Because that's where a lot of, the area we would want to replenish would begin. And, in my mind, I went for a walk on 4th of July Beach, and I'm like, wow, this is a gorgeous beach. Look at the gradation of the gravel as it goes out into the ocean, and then look at these beautiful grass-covered dunes, and, there's protection before, So that's kind of what I envision when I think about this project, but we need to know what other people envision.
So we were talking about priorities, and I see that the first priority is to reduce erosion farther into town. I mean, and actually try and gain some land back. And Stephanie mentioned 4th of July Creek, and 4th of July has a river coming out that's taking sediment and putting it out there and washes back and forth, which we don't have, which is the problem that brought this up, is that our debris is all being moved over to south of the Sea Life Center. And then, so that would be the first priority, because we put the bric-a-brac in and all that stuff because the bike path was starting to wash away. And we have places where the trees are still trying to about ready to fall into the lower beach. And so that, to me, that's priority one. And then priority two is to make the beach usable to the public. And I think that if you've been talking to people, I think a lot of local people, they're not going down. If the beach was walkable, people would use it and be happy with it. But it's rocky, and it's not. You can't throw frisbee. You can't go use it. So to me, priority two is making the beach a usable public, whatever you want to call it, whatever word it is. Recreation area, which is, in the tide zone. So, that to me, and then something a little bit different. You were talking about like starting to the north and working south as we're doing things. I would think that it would make more sense to start maybe not down by the Sea Life Center, because there's only a little area there that makes any sense, but start maybe a little south of Jefferson and work north. And I say that because the wave action is going to move whatever we put north. And so trying to go up, you're always kind of fighting it. Put it south and keep working an area there, and it's going to have a natural tendency to move debris the other direction and to level things out and stuff. Since I have the floor, the question of the fire pits. One of the fire pits, you haven't been here, but right now the density of the RV park is so much lighter than it was 20 years ago. 20 years ago that they were all 8 foot wide, and if there was 9 feet, somebody stuck in there under the door. It was so much more impacted than it is now. Okay. And the idea of losing any spaces down there, I think would hit a barrier, because this is Seward's the playground for all of Alaska. And the RV parks are one of the ways that Alaska's come out of that canyon. So I could see if there's room to move it back a little bit, and so you had another 4 or 5 feet, and then try and gain things the other direction. So the fire pits, before they put the metal ones in, everybody just built theirs, and it's just like almost impossible stuff. People can take all the rocks and build in their fire pit, and you go down there, and there's a fire every 15 feet, it seems like. So moving up to the other side of the walkway, the front line was moved back a little bit. That would make a big difference, because then I think you could do some things on the other side of the beach that would, and then with some education, get people to start maybe getting some grass here, so people start walking in between some stuff. Here, let somebody else have the floor.
Signage.
Yeah, so,
Randy?
No, go ahead.
Just a comment. You said that one of your priorities is to make the beach usable, for people to walk on and that sort of thing. Of course, right now, the situation we have, the way it is right now, depending on the tides, the beach is underwater. At certain times.
Well, don't use it when it's underwater. I would use it when the water's down. That would be my thing, but we're used to tides here.
Well, I don't know, but what I'm saying is that I think to make that beach usable, you would have to make most of that beach accessible regardless of what the tide was, which means moving that out, like Stephanie was saying, extending that out so that the tides don't come all the way. I mean, at certain times at high tides, I've seen the water almost up to the bike path.
Yeah, so to respond to that, I don't think, because of the steepness, since 64 and the area slid down, you're going to go down to an area where all of a sudden the waves, as long as the waves have action, when you get down to go deep enough where all of a sudden the wave action isn't really affecting things, it's just gonna drop off. So to try and, you're talking like, I mean, we're talking about in the studies we saw from Len and stuff, I mean, they moved the whole beach out hundreds of feet, even if we were talking 20. Personally, I don't think that's realistic.
Yeah, you'd have to
Because
put
anything you
Mount
try to
Marathon.
move up is just gonna, I mean, you look at, 50 years worth of stuff over here, and it's just a huge amount. I mean, to me, if we
It
could
falls off
just,
pretty quickly, not very, like 50 yards or something from shore. I mean, it
It's steep.
drops several hundred feet
yeah.
quickly.
So to me, I mean, we're gonna get stuff on top of the rocks out there so people can walk on it. But to try and move the dunes out is, I mean, it'd be a long-term thing. I mean, sticking a bunch of logs in there and getting the sand in it and get some grass and stuff growing, you could slowly move it out. But all you're gonna do is keep making the beach steeper. And as you make it steeper, it's going to erode faster and go right back. You know what I mean?
I'm not an engineer, and I think we can talk about what we want, but I think it'd be interesting to hear from the engineer what the plan would be, because I see on the drawbacks here, it says, 1, ecological concerns, marine life and shorebird nesting may be impacted, which would cause a lot of concerns, I think, in the community. Also, nurse beaches can erode 2 to 3 times faster than natural beaches. So if the project were like this to happen, where's the best place for it to happen, and what do they recommend would be done along the shoreline?
Yeah, and Christy, did you hear that question? And then also, I just want to make sure that you are following with the specific area that we are now discussing, which is the area where Jefferson Street sort of terminates there at the waterfront. When you and I spoke earlier, I pointed out that where the metal rails and cement are located there on the beach, that's the area that they're talking about. And then also talking about the waterfront camping, potentially getting some of the fire pits there off the beach so that we could work above the mean high water line in an effort to restore that. And then maybe if you could talk about that with regard to how would that help us combat the steepness of the beach, which is going to be a challenge.
Agreed. First, I'd like to caveat that I'm not an engineer. I support our waterfront engineering group with all things environmental and permitting, so I have some experience with it. But some of our earlier conversations with Andy and Kim, our lead waterfront engineer, last week, we talked about a few possible options. One thing we need to really get a handle on, which we've alluded to here, is the storm wave analysis and the bathymetry in this area. I think everybody's aware that it drops off pretty steep, real close to shore, so whether or not you're going to be able to build out further. A couple options that we tossed around would be to deposit some of the material that you have available more along the upland location and kind of create a sacrificial berm there and let the wave action kind of drag that back down towards the water, kind of let nature take its course. From a permitting perspective, the Corps of Engineers would like that, and that there's not a lot of tidal fill, so that would be a benefit. Whether or not towards the edge of where the shelf drops off, you engineer something to keep your fill from sloughing off into the fjord, that would be another option. But there is going to be some long-term maintenance on that. Similar to the project that was done not too long ago, where we had some larger riprap placed and then eventually filling that over top with some of the finer material. Then you'd have your stabilization, and then once that material kind of fills in and settles, you'd have your walkable beach. But I do agree there needs to be some consideration of the ecological impacts. The Corps of Engineers is required to authorize the least impactful alternative that you're considering. So keep that in mind with project scope, your areas, and volume of material. But I do think there's an opportunity to highlight some of the additional benefits. From what I've heard, the material, the debris that is accumulating is creating some flood risk. So if you were to remove that from the problem areas and use it as a stabilization project and a recreational enhancement project, I think that's a win-win. And then it'd be returning the material to where it would have naturally flowed towards. So all of these things are important to communicate with the Corps and to think about while you're developing and refining the objectives. I think that really plays into the purpose of the project and the need for the project, which the Corps will evaluate while they review your application.
Well, that sounds like it fits into what I remember from our September meeting, but because we're using the rock and the gravel that would normally have come down Jefferson and Wolf Creek to this area, which is now coming out of the waterfall, building up over there, causing floods and damage to that area. And if we used it, it is not foreign material. Environmentally, it would not be as impactful as getting something from out of Resurrection River or whatever. So, I mean, that wouldn't even be that bad. But in placing it over top of the riprap that's there, do we need to put more riprap in areas first? Are there areas, so I guess the wave action study and things, has that been done? Do we have any of that information?
We do. FEMA did a risk map study of the coastline, and those were adopted by the community in 2016. So we have very recent coastal run-up data from FEMA's contractors. So that could easily be provided to a coastal engineer to conduct this, to look at the storm wave analysis and kind of study the bathymetry to see how far out we could go, how much material we could put on the beachfront there.
And one more other thing that would be important would be to get a sample and do a sieve analysis of the material that you want to use as fill material so that we can calculate quantities as well as erosion potential. See how large the material is or fine grained it is.
And I believe we have that also.
Excellent.
Any other input at this moment before I'd like to talk about next steps? Yes,
I
was
have a
it?
question. So, is there chronic erosion along here? Dangerous erosion?
At times when we have high tides and southern winds. Any winds.
When
But
you say
mostly
chronic erosion, that's continuously washing the fire drain stuff out. I mean, even 10 years ago, the difference between
Property loss, utilities at stake, real estate disappearing into the ocean, or you're just noticing some change in the beach profile?
well, so, I would guess it's change of beach, but it is continually getting closer to the bike path. We've had places where the bike path is broken off.
we purposely made this a no-build zone after the quake, so we're not endangering, in the lane. Margaret Branson Pavilion is one of the higher spots on the beach, and so the bike path has been. I don't know if the building down by Scheffler, which is a pump station, if that has been in jeopardy at any time from erosion at this point.
Not that I've heard of.
But that is one of the places that we have added riprap, right, in front of that. And so if we could put some more beach and some beach grass or some kind of green to help hold that.
And has the ocean ever flooded this campground? Has there been a
Yes.
Yeah.
hurricane-like surge that?
Yeah,
Yes.
and it throws rocks up onto the parking area and the bike path.
We've had rocks thrown up on the road.
Yeah.
Going down.
And on the other side of that bike path is utility infrastructure. There are new electric hookups.
Yeah, well, this Beachville in the lower 48 and the Sandy Coast is actually the most common type of erosion control, public erosion control. There areas. And that probably goes from a lot of the rest of the world to several decades. And so the main purpose of erosion control and the storm surge buffer, that really is important to the design. As far as the recreational access, Sandy Beach, like over 4th of July, is probably less very long at all. The more natural beach here would be gravel, like tunnel. So, that's not what vacationers in the tropics picture the beach, but that's what would be natural here.
Yeah, I think just covering some of the riprap, because we do have people that go down on that and try to get, near animals out there, and just to have it more walkable in all the areas, cover up what we've done with riprap, I think. I don't think we're looking for a low-lying beach or a 4th of July type beach, but just something that's usable and safe. Tom?
So, for clarification, just with Clipboard, you said something about the fill would be coming from Low Creek, but I think there was talk earlier about the need to move fill from other places like Gap Creek, Resurrection Creek, Seward Creek. I just wanted to clarify, we're not talking about just moving fill from this kind of town here. I think the flood board is interested in finding locations to move fill from creeks, all of which flood into the bay.
Sure.
And they're all adding to the beach. We just need to move it to a different part of the beach. But I just want to make it clarify that we're not stating about just one location to
Right.
move fill.
We have sources.
It's where you guys need to get rid of fill, and we would like fill, I guess, the best way to put it. Okay.
Yeah.
Just one more thing about that global experience. These nourishment projects are all sacrificial. None of them last.
Right.
They go in, wash away, you have to have a program, do it again and again. To keep your objectives, keep the ground safe that you're protecting, dissipate storms so that it doesn't flood as bad, or it doesn't flood at all. It's not a program. 5 years, 10 if you're lucky. Maybe only 2 or 3 if you're unlucky and a really big storm comes.
I think we talked about last summer, this would be almost a continuous thing. We continuously need material from other places. So it would be, that's the way I foresee it. It'd be just every year something, some years you would have more because we'd have a bigger storm, we'd more needs to be moved, and other years it piles up, but.
All the material that comes out of our streams eventually winds up in Resurrection Bay. So what we're talking about here is everything off Resurrection River, the Seward Creek watershed, Gap Creek, Scheffler Creek, all the way out to Spruce Creek, 4th of July, of course, Sawmill, the whole batch. A lot of rock will be probably accessible for this project from our mitigation efforts on the upper reaches of Salmon Creek, as well as areas that will be working possibly the Resurrection River shortly being within the next year or 2.
So we were talking about something, and we were talking about we're starting to start, I know we're ready to start about the next step, but the idea that a lot of this rock would be coming, or debris would be coming down to the larger rocks. We're going to have that, but there'd be the ability, as we said, if we were doing a full beach where we can drop debris below the high tide line, or below or down by the low tide line, debris, rock, material that is larger could be dropped low on the beach, and that would have a tendency to hold the smaller fines and stuff higher on the beach.
Basically, we call that size cobblestone. We throw that down first over the riprap, and then we go in over that with the run finish up D1 and hammer it flat, go to the natural environment from there. And it'll last until the next big storm.
Well, keep it on, 100 years from now, we might have more waterfront.
Well, we could line the toe of the riprap possibly with a lining of sheet piling down low to help tow it in to help avoid erosion along the base of the.
Well, I was saying, going back to the need, I see where you're going. It's expensive. I'm looking at, there's a need to move material from other places. And again, if you put that material farther down on the beach, and natural erosion moves it farther down, there's nothing wrong with that. And we keep moving material in, it's going to keep moving that down, and this whole beach slowly, that steepness is moving, and we gain stuff. And over time, your dunes are going to get bigger, and beaches get bigger. And it really isn't necessary to come out and try and put pilings in and do something down there.
Only if we take it out just so far. Now, where we're here at Jefferson Street, that's the old channel of Low Creek, so that's a good toe of land underneath the water there.
Yes.
Now, this other one over here, that's an old ancient outlet of what we call Scheffler Creek.
Right.
Now, that's gonna be the other toe, but like you mentioned, Tom, right in between there, we've got a pretty good little drop off.
Right.
And that one's gonna be where we're gonna have to figure out something to help tie it all in. I don't know if we can just fill that area with riprap and call that good.
No, I'm not talking about it. If you follow me, I'm not talking about putting riprap in. I'm just letting nature do what nature would do anyway. We put the rock down, it washes it down, we put the fine out, if we put, if you have, I don't know where, if low tide is here and high tide is here, you put your bigger rocks in here and your finer stuff up here, the stuff that gets off, it's slowly gonna roll down this hill, it's going to disappear. Just like out here, 20 years ago, you couldn't walk out to the board out there. It all fills in naturally. I'm just talking about we just keep putting it there because we keep needing to put stuff someplace. You keep putting there, just let nature do whatever it's going to do in that beach spot.
And
Yeah, so.
Unending supply,
So I want to bring this topic now back to Christy.
Yes.
So if we did apply for a project where we were going to repeatedly deposit materials on the beach for X amount of years, and we quantified that material, however much we decide to go for, is that something that you feel like the Army Corps would view as being highly impactful? If there isn't anything to keep that from, just washing right on into the bay and into the abyss, how likely are they to go for that?
I think it's possible. Your direct impact area remains the same, but we just want to be cautious that the area that it's being lost to isn't considered a habitat, important habitat, whether or not there's eelgrass out there or any essential fish habitat, whatever their determination is. But I think maintenance is kind of an assumption on this. So you would have your permit term for 5 to 10 years where you could repeatedly add material just as long as, the indirect area isn't sensitive habitat.
did we have a sensitive habitat on pipeline front?
I wouldn't think so because it's been eroding for years.
There's only
We're not going to create
there's only
erosion much different
eelgrass
than
on
already
the
happening.
north side of Scheffler Creek.
Eelgrass on
Yeah,
the north side.
but we're not talking about putting anything.
Right.
That's where we have a nice
That's right.
sandy pocket
Yeah.
beach right
That's
there.
Right.
So
Okay.
how do you define the critical habitat? We mentioned eelgrasses. I mean, that's an important fish nursery, but what else would be critical habitat?
Well, maybe the old railroad cars that are down there, I don't know.
Well, yeah.
For the fish, or
Uh-huh.
coral reefs, but, who's got next step? Who's lined that up? Arson.
I keep speaking up because I worked for the Corps for over 20 years
Yeah.
as a coastal engineer, and then I taught coastal engineering for 8 years. I don't need to.
No.
Hey,
You're-
Go for it.
Talking about what's credentials. You're who we want to
So I can give you a kind of a thumbnail, textbook
Okay.
kind of thing for waste done most places, and a bit about what the Corps have done in the state. So you design a berm. You basically you fill on with a big wide ladle, and then this trapezoidal berm almost immediately transforms to a more natural shape, which means if it's deposited in the upper tidelands, a lot of it slides into the lower tidelands, and it has more a shape that's attuned to the waves. Actually, the waves sort of design it to be stable. And of course, the material, the longer it'll last. But the usual approach is to get material that matches what's natural. So you may be destroying some habitat by covering it up, but it'll repopulate. If it's similar, if it's natural-like material, even if it comes from inland, as long as the grain size isn't too different, that habitat, or subtidal habitat, will come back. That's a test that's common to all those thousands of beach fills in the lower 48. And it's one of the challenges because sometimes it gets hard to find the right material. But here I don't really see it as that sensitive. Maybe that yield mix place, but otherwise, you use gravel from the creeks, it is natural.
Mark?
I think that's what we heard from the Corps last week, exactly that concept. And I think, question if you say that's correct, that's also the easiest to permit.
Love it.
So, next step, do we need someone to design the project? Is that the next step, or is the next step contacting the Corps? I mean, and who's contacting the Corps? Where are we at?
From my opinion, if we want this to be a long-term replenishment project, I would recommend talking to a coastal engineer to do a design plan. I don't know how much that would cost. We probably wouldn't need to do a whole lot of data collection around it because, like I said, we already have the FEMA maps.
The waves and the synth and all that?
Yeah. I mean, I think we've got the data, but if you actually want to plan for the majority of the waterfront and not just plan for one little project test site, basically, then I'd like to see a coastal engineer come in and actually look at our data, look at our waterfront, do the testing samples, and then give us a plan, because that makes the permitting process so simple.
So the cost of that plan and who pays for that plan?
Yeah, who does pay for it?
That's actually my next question. So currently, the city has used the offer from the Alaska Railroad to pay for the hauling of the material from Lowell. So besides, I think, maybe a couple pieces of equipment and city guys loading up trucks, the cost for that hauling is being paid for in the last several years by the Alaska Railroad. Did you happen to have a chance to ask those questions?
Yeah, so the Alaska Railroad's doing some development on northern lots pretty close to the airport. And we had the opportunity to utilize the aggregate materials down the waterfall. And there's no cost for the material, but postage is pretty expensive. And the hauling is, we took on, I've got a couple of notes here, 1,500 cubic yards of material, and to get Medco to move it for us and to spread it, it was about $90,000. And so what does that amount of material look like? 1,500 cubic yards. It was, I don't know, at least half a foot deep over 2 acres.
Over the whole 2 acres, not just the shoreline of 2 acres?
No, this is
Fill, you did fill?
fill, yeah, permitted fill.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Okay, so you're talking about who's paying for it. So we have railroad helping pay for it, thinking city, are you thinking city hauling, city loading?
Well,
City-
yeah, I mean, that would be
As
one of
a match or whatever?
I'm not thinking anything, I'm just giving you, kind of the cost estimates of actually doing this. So, I mean, the cheapest cost estimates we have for actually harvesting and hauling material from Jap Creek and taking it, the less than half-mile round trip to the solid waste is $50, a 12-yard dump truck, an in-dump truck. So that's, that adds up very quickly. Jap Creek would be a great place to haul material out of right now. So, we are planning a Japanese Creek project, but it would be very minimal in the spring. We are working towards, sediment management from Japanese Creek on a regular basis, but once again, we're still waiting on state DNR. So that would be, my questions, and that would be a conversation for the city and the board to have of, who's paying for everything. And I think that the coastal engineering, that might be possibly, and I'm with the board chair here, that might be something that the city could make a request to the flood board to contract out. And usually when we do, we do a lot of joint projects with the city, and typically if the city wants us to do something, and I'm looking to Tyler, because the riprap that got placed in front of the pavilion and the playground area was a joint project of riprap. And it's basically just a letter from the city saying, hey, we're working on this project, we'd like assistance from the flood service area, and we put it before the board, and I don't think the board has ever said no to the city. So in this case, if that's what the planning commissioners would recommend, then recommend city administration to put a letter to the flood board saying, hey, we'd like you to add to your project list coastal engineering design plans for this stretch of waterfront. So that would be a next step.
Okay.
I have a suggestion for another next step.
A different or the next step after this step?
No, I think they should go together.
Okay.
From my understanding, we can put material above the high mean tide or the high tide. Actually, I don't think it's high mean, I think it's high. We can put some stuff at that level and with no permitting. And we were talking about kind of a test project, especially maybe down here by just south of Jefferson. It's an area that's kind of nice, and I think that it'd be possible to get a couple truckloads, especially like really soon, and get them dumped right at mean high tide and just left there to see how erosion deals with it and stuff between now and start of the tourist season, or the first season. And I would think that if it was possible to get just a couple truckloads at that level, just to get an idea of what our nature's doing. Got to make sure the water can get out faster. You don't want to make a lake onto the bike path.
So at a work session, we don't take action, but to do these two items, getting a request to put some fill in that location above high water, and may write a letter to the administration, right, to the flood board, requesting funds for a study or a project plan. That would have to come at a meeting in the future.
You could, if one of your commissioners decide tonight to add it to the agenda, it can be added as a discussion item under new business.
You could add it as a discussion item, but do we have to have public notice in order to make a decision on it?
Well, you guys can add it as a discussion, and if you're giving administration direction to draft a letter, that it would come back to you guys, but that gives us the direction to do that for the next meeting.
And the same with a request for, I would think, City Public Works to dump some fill?
Well, actually, I think Park and Recreation could just do that. They could do it at the administrative level.
But Okay, you could ask Public Works to do that.
Right. Yeah, I don't think the board would need to make any decision on that. That'd be something the city would just, if they want to do it, they do it.
It's not against code.
Yeah, it'd be
I'd like to put
administrative.
it in the minutes
Yeah.
that we requested it, so that it's down in writing somewhere, because right now, this isn't. we are
Yeah,
not
and
recording these minutes.
you guys can add that as a discussion item, to just give a brief description and direction of what you'd like.
Okay.
Did you have any particular grade or type of gravel that you want to put there?
Me?
For the test, for the test,
I'd like to see what just comes off.
just from
Yeah.
the outfall there.
When are you gonna have stuff with Jack Creek, Nelson?
Probably June, July.
June, July.
As soon as we'll have it.
I was gonna say, if we wanted to get scientific,
And
we
it's
could do
fine.
one of each.
I was gonna say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do little test piles on top of the riprap that we did a couple of years
Do some
ago.
bets.
See which way it is.
Drive by 10 o'clock some night and see some local trying to quickly throw it in the back of the spring.
Why would they? Could just go get all they want. Nobody's ever stopped me from picking
Well,
it up out there.
Out there, Tom, it's a little convenient.
If it's totally exposed to the sea, I think we should be careful with this experiment, make sure we're really doing what's right.
Above mean high water.
Yeah.
So that we're.
High,
we're
high,
either
or
High,
lower
high,
high,
water
high.
in
It's
that
gotta be
area.
above high, high.
We're putting this out so the ocean can get to it and see what happens then. I gotta wonder if that isn't within the permitting authority.
So we talked to him last September, when we talked, he said, we put it up, you can put any one up there. We're not putting it to the ocean, we're getting it to the rain and people and animals and the normal traffic on a beach naturally moves it down to where the ocean is.
And maybe rare storm events.
Yeah, rare storm event type of thing.
Why not just get a permit?
Well, no,
Yeah.
we're doing them both.
Maybe
started-
Just get started on the permit, then we'll work on the engineering and we can do lots more with the permit.
Absolutely.
I know the Corps always encourages early notice. They get advice, they invite pre-application meetings, encourage strongly.
We will have the Army Corps regulatory team down on April 23rd for our annual permitting day. Tyler, if you could come by in the afternoon, maybe we could spend some time talking to Andy and go do a site visit and take a look at what we might want to do and how we can make that happen and whether or not that would require permits.
Okay, and can we get an idea of what a project contract would cost? I mean,
The engineer,
yeah, just what's the number?
Get a cost estimate.
Yeah, what they would charge for one, and we'd have to bid it out, RFP it, or you can
For
sole
budgetary
source?
purposes, I could request
Just a-
a budgetary cost
okay.
estimate for coastal engineering for half a mile.
Okay, then you could,
Just curious, sorry, I
No.
came a little late to the beginning here, but, have you guys ever thought about or stuff, inquired about the feasibility of like would be much more expensive, but like a hardened promenade, and actually
levy,
seawalls,
seawall.
essentially. I mean, I know you're talking probably an order of magnitude more in cost.
And then it's hard to get that in some of our areas where we are protecting residences, like out, such as woods and stuff.
Yeah.
You'll learn after a
Everybody
year or
does.
two.
Yeah.
Or some-
Earlier I said I might say something about what I know has been done in the state, which is very, very little. The Corps, when they get involved in erosion control, a couple things. One, it's usually pretty bad. I mean, by the time they get to the construction phase, it's yet worse. So the softer types of alternatives aren't as appealing. And the other is that they're a very conservative group, even among the agency up here in Alaska. And they're just not inclined to use beach nourishment like the lower 48 core districts do. So they don't have much experience, but they have a couple of places where they use their own dredge material as beach nourishment. One is in Nilchik here on the peninsula. They dredge that river out, and the material is deposited on the beach just to the north of the entrance there. That's the prevailing direction, and that's one case that's been done for decades. Not the Corps, but the DOT has actually built a couple of beach mills that I'm aware of, and they were kind of experimental because the body of literature doesn't really go into using gravel a lot. It's all sand. It's huge experience in the sandy beaches, but much less in gravel beaches. But this was Harvey Smith and Ruth Carter. They're both retired now, but they designed a beach fill that has erosion control in a southwestern village, like in the Alaska Peninsula somewhere, and I can't name it. But one that you probably have seen is that fishing hole on Homer's Pit. That place down on the harbor side down towards the end, there's this big indentation. And salmon come in there by design, and the outer part of that, both sides of the entrance, was placed material designed to protect it there. And that's been a success. And it's gravelly beach fill.
We have a 7 o'clock planning and zoning commission meeting, which we need to put the room back in shape. Marcy, thank you. Hopefully, you might be able to.
Chrissy, our meeting is adjourning now, and I want to thank you very much for calling in.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right.
Have a good evening.
I'll talk to you soon, okay?
Oh.
All right. Bye-bye. Yeah, and then